Hi there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com here with this week's episode of the Market Monday. It's Monday, right? Somewhere in some alternate universe, I'm sure it's a Monday. Anyway, it's Wednesday. Late to the party this time with the Market Monday. As you can tell, I'm feeling a little bit under the weather, so if I cough and sneeze in the microphone, I apologize in advance. It's been a nasty flu season and cold season for the 2019-2020 year. Been sick a bunch this year. Anyway, let's not talk about getting sick. Let's talk about the topic at hand, which is Brawl. Brawl is donezo. There are no more Brawls and any distributors. So this actually came upon us pretty quickly. Last week, I was monitoring Brawl. All four of the distributors I buy from had them. And then within a short period of just a couple of days, all of them simultaneously went out of stock. So it makes me think that it was a coordinated buyout for Brawl. Someone must have got the print numbers and realized that the overall print numbers weren't as high as we anticipated for the restock of Brawl, because there was a point when Brawl was restocked that there was no limitations. You could buy to your heart's desire on Brawl, and that didn't last long. So kind of crazy. It's always a crapshoot with sealed product from Magic the Gathering of whether or not the inventory is going to swing so drastically, and whether or not you do have time to actually invest in stuff, because you never want money that is just not moving. So investing too early in Throne of Eldraine Brawl decks could have been investing in something you could have flipped. So when I quit being able to sell Throne of Eldraine Brawl decks, I backed off. But now it looks like the demand is here again. So we're going to talk about the outlook of the Throne of Eldraine Brawl, as well as talk about a similar product that had a similar print wave as Brawl, which is Commander 2019, and analyze Commander 2019 and see if Commander 2019 is a good buy. So Brawl is still pretty reasonable with how much you get if you were to invest in a Brawl. You get 2 decks per Brawl display. Brawl displays usually cost around $100 distributor price, and they retail for about $20 a piece. So there wasn't the greatest margin on those to begin with, as 8 decks times 20 is 160. If you paid 100 for it, that's a pretty low margins for the Brawl decks. However, going forward, these probably will start to climb in price for the sealed, and there still are a lot of goodies left in these decks. So the one that really stands out would be the Jund Commander, would be the Korvold Fakehurst King, because Korvold is still going for $750, and I expect this card to actually start climbing back up, because it's not only one of the most popular commanders of all time, it is still seeing play in Standard and also sees play in Pioneer. And so something that comes out of a pre-constructed deck, and this is the only way to get it, and now that's long gone, and these are pack full value to begin with, I could see Korvold rebounding quite quickly. The other things that are contained in the Brawl decks are cards like Arcane Signet, and then we have a Shockland out of every Brawl deck, and that's what makes this one so appealing, is not only you get the $7 Korvold, but you get a Stomping Ground, which is one of the better Shocklands, one of the more popular Shocklands in the scope of all 10 of the Shocklands. So Stomping Ground is a card that could start to rebound, but I would like to give everyone a huge warning about Shocklands, because we have something coming out in March called Challenger decks. Now, Challenger decks should be very similar to last year, meaning that they are going to be based upon the Throne of Eldraine Pro Tour or Mythic Championship, whatever you want to call it now, the results from that. However, there were a lot of Oko decks in that time period, so I'm assuming that they had to wait a little bit before they got the lists of what they would do for Challenger decks. And I am definitely thinking there's going to be a Gruul version of some sort of deck. So you have Gruul Embercleave that could easily be a Challenger deck. You have Food that could easily be a Challenger deck, which would be Jund, which would be my pick for a Challenger deck. And I think that there's even maybe like Gruul Adventures that could be, but usually I like to look at cards that are from the rotating sets, and that really makes me think that Gruul from the Ravnica Allegiance, which had the spell piercers or spell shockers, whatever they're called, the Gruul 3/3s that turn into 4/4s. You also have the 2/2s that turn into 3/3s. You have things like Pell Collector. All those things can go in the deck, and it can make a nice streamlined Gruul aggro-based strategy, which actually did reasonable around that time period. So I'm thinking the Stomping Ground is going to get a reprint, and so that makes these Brawl decks a little less appealing long term, especially if there's multiple Shocklands included in those decks. The Challenger decks of last time were pretty lackluster, and I'm thinking that Wizards is wanting to guarantee that they sell, and so I'm thinking they're going to pack them full of shocks just to make sure that they fly off the shelves and don't happen what happened last year with them getting still. To this day, you can buy Challenger decks at way under the MSRP. I can still order them from distributors for about $140 a pop for a 2 sets of Challenger decks. And yeah, so I'm thinking that they learned their lesson from Challenger decks. They're going to be a little more choosy on the cards that they actually include in the list so that they do have some sort of value post-rotation. And that way they can sell out of these Challenger decks. All right, so other Challenger decks that I think will be, speaking of we have this Esper deck, and this Esper deck did have the Watery Grave in it. Now, I'm actually thinking that black-blue control might be a little more appealing than white-blue control, but white-blue control did see a lot of top 8s in that time period with Teferi. We could see them go all out and put a bunch of Teferis in the Challenger decks, and then it would be a Hallowed Fountain rather than Watery Grave, and we miss the black-blue Shockland. But we also have the mechanic that is quite strong, the Surveil mechanic, that did have some lists during that time period that they could make the argument for creating. So I still am going to give a nod to U-White. I think it's going to be the Hallowed Fountain that gets the reprint, and that way Watery Grave is actually safe in this list. They also could go Esper Hero. That was a pretty popular deck at the time period, but I don't know if they want to go 3 colors. 3 colors, the mana base gets a lot more wonky than 2 colors, and that's why I'm still sticking like Gruul as one of them and then U-White Control as the other. And that way I think that Watery Grave in this, at least for the prospect of it being able to go up, is a better candidate than something like Hallowed Fountain. I think the risk is just too high there. So looking over this particular Brawl deck, the same thing is very similar. The value is in the Smothering Tithe. So you have 1 rare in the Smothering Tithe, and you also have the Watery Grave that's holding the bulk of the value, and the Arcane Signet. This is pretty much across the board for most Brawl decks. The other cards in the list are okay for the most part, but even like a Layla has all the way down to $3. There's like Massacre Girl in this list, and there's a Kaya's Wrath. All of them do see a decent amount of play in Standard, but there's not a lot of other things to get really excited about in these Brawl decks. They're much smaller than the Commander decks. They do cost half the price of a Commander deck, so you got to factor that in when comparing them to Commander. But long term, I think that the majority of these cards aren't going to age well, with the exception of some of these compared to Commander, and we'll take a look at that in a second. All right, so we go over to the Knight's Charge. It is very similar here. We have just the Arcane Signet and the Godless Shrine that hold the vast majority of the deck, and then we have the Knight of the Even Legion, which sees a lot of Pioneer play and a lot of Standard play. So this card's actually a good investment post-rotation because it's probably one of the best 1-drops ever printed. In this day and age in Standard, we're seeing some of the most powerful cards or creatures ever printed, and they're going to continue to shine in the Modern and into the Pioneer format for years and years to come, unless there is another power creep in creatures. But I think that Wizards is going to tone down creatures and kind of go back to more of spells that can answer these creatures. That's kind of how it ebbs and flows in Magic the Gathering. Last but not least, we do have this Wild Bounty deck, and this one was quite interesting because it did have a Hallowed Fountain. So if I suspect is correct, Hallowed Fountain will get another printing in the Challenger decks, but I do think the breeding pool is a given. I think there will be some sort of blue-green ramp strategy that is in the Challenger decks, and it's probably going to be loaded with Nissas and Hydroid Krasis. Both of those are equity that's rotating. But Wizards is going to be very interesting to see if they're actually going to tap into their equity from Pioneer, now that Pioneer is a legit thing. And if that's the case, maybe they won't print something like Hydroid Krasis in a large number. But in my opinion, it will be, the other one will be a blue and green ramp strategy, as we were littered with those. Yes, most of them did run Oko, but they still did very good after the Oko banning, and they did usually run the 1-2 punch of Nissa and Hydroid Krasis. So I'm expecting Breeding Pool to get the reprint in that mix, and we could also see, of course, the Temple of Mystery, which is also rotating with the coming of the next rotation. So we're going to have like a Standard where only half of them are legal again. All right, so now let's move over to Commander. And Commander is something I am really bullish on. I tend to agree with Alpha Investments here, Rudy, that Commander product is one of the things that goes out of sight, out of mind, and then rebounds quite quickly. You can't go back in time to any real Commander deck that has an accrued value over time. There are some that did get double reprints in the when they do the Commander, what are they called? Commander Arsenals, not Commander Arsenals, but when they do the ways where they reprint Commander decks. And some of those are still quite lackluster as far as the contents in them. But these particular cards in the Commander, even this year, that was very lackluster in the scope of things, tend to rebound quite quickly until they're reprinted. And so it's all about timing when you buy and sell these. So not only do the singles look pretty good from Commander 2019, but keeping these sealed also seems quite reasonable. Now, if you take away the value of all the $2 and below cards, there aren't a lot of things that actually do stick out. But there are things like Thespian Stage that I want to point out because these have a lot higher real world value than you would expect. So here is a $2.50 card, but the buy list is $1.50 out the gates. It doesn't lose a lot of value right now if you just were even to buy list them back. And I'm going to have to break these down to see what the actual buy list price. I've done it before with some products. Put this all in a spreadsheet and then get all the buy list price from like Card Kingdom or Channel Fireball. But the same thing can be said about most of these cards. So $1.80 for Reliquary Tower you can get, and it's just increasing. It's been reprinted. It goes down to $1.50, and it's already up to $2.75. This card will get another reprint in Commander products, but it's going to continue to go up until then. And so these are always good little holds. They're always more liquid too. When comparing it to like standard cards, it's a lot easier to find homes for Commander cards if you're using things like CardSphere or any other trading services. These are pretty good, easy to find good spreads for. And some of these other cards like Golgari Rot Farms, they actually do have more value than you'd suspect. Buy lists often pay like 10-15 cents for them. And even cards like Bajuko Bog in here, Ash Barons, these things have long-term value. But again, this was a year that was very lackluster, but that might actually be going for the set, not going against the set. So if this Commander set was just the best thing ever, these would have been open like crazy. They would have been reprinted, would have been open like crazy again, and probably would have been reprinted again. Whereas now I think that they are done. They did restock them because it was probably the smallest Commander wave I've ever seen with the initial Commander wave. And then we had to wait a while. I mean, it came out in August, and then they refilled it for the Christmas season. And it looks like the second wave was much bigger than the first wave. And the second wave, however, did not sell. So I don't think that there was ever any consideration for doing a third wave. I think that they do look at Commander sets and see how they're selling and be like, okay, do you want to do a third or fourth wave of these? And these ones definitely did not get the nod. And the supply of these is probably a lot less for this year than years in the past. And the overall choices of these cards are quite weak, but there are some unique cards that were printed in this set that I think have a good chance of going up in the long term. Cards like Rayami, the First of the Fallen, they have very unique abilities. They're pretty decent abilities that are going to go into decks from years to come. And even like cards like Grim Haruspex is starting to pick up some Pioneer play and has been a staple in Commander for a long time. And you have all the other staples like the Secure Tri-Builders and whatnot that are included in these. And yes, they don't look too appealing, but they are more liquid than you would think. And that's the name of the game a lot of times for Magic the Gathering Finance is how liquid is this card. There are some times that you have a valuable card that's like, say, $20, $30, but it's more obscure, and it's actually hard to find a buyer at that price, and you have to give it up many times with the spread that's very unfavorable. We're talking about, a 40% spread or a 50% spread, something that is not nearly as good as even these $1 and $2 cards. You can get rid of at a 75% or a 25% spread or a 15% spread. So that's one of the reasons I do like these cards a lot from Commander is you can click on the vast majority of them, and they all do tend to have pretty decent spreads here. I mean, this one's a 50% spread at the moment, but you should see Seedmore Muse start to climb up in both the market price and in the buy list price. All right, if we take a look at some of the other cards that are included in the Commander, there's some really good ones like Dockside Extortionist. This could be easily a $25, $30 card within a year if it doesn't get a reprint. And this was just a one and done, might as well be a mythic at this rate, and is a very, very popular card in Commander. Right here, the Dockside Extortionist almost makes the value back of getting the Commander decks at price. Currently, I can get Commander decks for $84, so that ends up being what, like So a little, what, $21 a piece is what it ends up costing you to get a commander deck, and you're already getting it back at a Dockside Extortionist that, depending on what you value it as, buy list right now for $13. That's a huge chunk to actually go towards that cost of this particular product. Now, this set also, or this particular box set also doesn't have a lot of other things that are too sweet, but once again, we have the Ash Baron type cards, we have the Ghostly Prison type cards, we have all these cards that tend to do well long term. So I'm still even liking this one, which is considered the worst one out of the mix besides the Dockside Extortionist. The Primal Genesis has probably the least amount of value. This is the one that's tough. This is the one that you really have to hope that cards like Cinderglade will shine long term. Because Cinderglade is something that sees played in Scapeshift. It is a very common land that sees played in multiple formats. So this is what you're kind of banking on with this particular one. This one is much tougher because if you weed out everything that's $3 and below, you're left with like a Oran Frostfang. But again, I am still bullish on these type of cards, especially these more unique ones, that they have the opportunity to go up in the future just because of how low the print run was. Then we have the Merciless Rage. This one is the kind of the in my opinion, the hidden gem out of the mix, because I think there's some cards in here in this particular list that are going to age very well. One is Crick, Son of Yagamoth, one of the most powerful commanders ever printed, one of the most busted cards ever printed for the commander format. You also do have a lot of kind of staple cards in these lists, with like cards like Chaos Warp that always rebound quite good. I think this is the most played red card in Commander. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure it's at least top 5, and it's included in here. And you have cards like the Bone Miser, which are very, very powerful and fun, flavorful for the Commander format that I think are going to age extremely well. So this one's kind of the hidden gem, where I think that the price tag being so low is something that we're going to look back and be like, yeah, this deck wasn't as bad as we thought it was. So that's kind of my analysis of Brawl versus Commander. The $1 million question really is how big is the supply for Commander? So full disclosure, all 4 distributors are still jam-packed full of these with the exception of one. One has low stock of the Commander 20. Actually, 2 of them have low stock, but one of the distributors is notorious for never having stock of anything. In my opinion, I'm not going to name names here, but I'm thinking that distributor is actually Sports & More, and they just give all of their non-allocated product over to Sports & More, and Sports & More just fire sells it all. And that's why you see cheap prices at the get-go, and that's why you continue to see the Sports & More continue to be stocked up with stuff. Is this, I think it's a shell for a distributor company, because ordering from that distributor company, usually the only thing I can get from Magic the Gathering is like the latest set. I can't even get War of the Spark from that distributor, for example. It's already gone. It's something that they do not continue to sell, and in my opinion, it's probably because it doesn't sell as quickly as they like, and so they're using their shell company to continue to move that product. So anyway, I'm losing my voice here, so we're going to call it good for this Market Monday. If you are interested in these type of pricing, I do host a Patreon over at patreon.com/roguedeckbuilder, where you can basically be a part of my local game store. You can own shares basically in the success. So anything I can snag for distributor cost, you can get by being a patron. Helps keep us afloat, helps give me money each month to kind of work with, and it also helps me with my purchasing power to be competitive on the pricing. So the more people, the merrier. Come join our vibrant Discord. Come get these insane prices. Like I said, $84 is the price of Commander decks at the moment. Shipping is kind of awkward on these, but if you buy multiples of them, you can actually get shipping down per box quite reasonable, even if you live across the country. If you're somewhere like California or Colorado or Nevada, it's incredibly cheap to ship these products, as I am based here in Utah. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. This has been Kevin with the Rogue Deck Builder. Thanks for watching.